realistic simulations show you what the weather will look and feel like before it happens.
Feel the forecast, streaming on CBS News.
She's the most successful alpine skier, male or female, ever, and a worldwide inspiration.
We need a lot of women doing sports really, really well.
The story of Michaela Schifrin's game-changing reign at the top of the slopes when we go person to person.
The Israel-Hamas war. Stay with CBS News for continuing coverage.
I think he would say exactly what he said to y'all yesterday when he got asked this question. It's a worthwhile thought, but the approach that I'm taking now is working.
We are now in second place in Iowa, second place in New Hampshire, and second place in South Carolina. We just have one more fellow we got to catch up to.
She's Rosalind Carter, and she has her own mind and her own things that she wants to get done. And Equal Rights Amendment was one, the mental health is another.
Hello, I'm Nicole Killian in Washington, and welcome to America Decides. Both Israel and Hamas confirmed that a ceasefire will be extended for another 2 days. This announcement comes just before the original 4-day truce was set to expire. Hamas has also agreed to release an additional 20 hostages over the next 2 days. Israel had previously said they'd be willing to continue the humanitarian pause each day Hamas released at least 10 hostages. Today, 11 more hostages were let go, but that includes no Americans. National Security Council Strategic Communications Coordinator Admiral John Kirby joins us now. Admiral, thanks so much for being with us. What more do we know about the potential release of hostages?
Well, we know that 11 got out today. This was the fourth and final day of the original agreement. That's good news for 11. That's good news for 11 families, of course. And now, thanks to President Biden's leadership and involvement, we've got an extra 2 days now coming up of 2 more days of pauses, 2 more days of humanitarian assistance getting into people who need it, and just as critically, 2 more days of some 20 hostages being released by Hamas and getting back to their families. We'll keep a close eye on this day to day here, the next 2 days, to see who's coming out. We obviously hope to see more Americans in that group.
And do you expect any more Americans to be part of that group?
You know, we're saying we're hoping. It's difficult to say we expect because we don't often see the list until later in the morning on each day, and even then, you got to watch to see who actually comes across the border, make sure that they're all on that list. So we hope that more Americans will come out here in these next 2 installments, but we'll have to wait and see.
And if not, then what?
Well, I mean, we're just going to keep working at this. We heard the president talk about this over the Thanksgiving weekend. We want to see all the hostages, all of them, back with their families where they belong. And that, of course, includes a number of Americans. And we're not going to stop until we get them all home. I can't go into detail right now about what the modalities of that would look like. We're focused right now on, now that we've got the 4 days done, getting the next 2 days executed, and then we'll see where it goes. As I mentioned today in the briefing room here at the White House, we certainly would like to see this 2-day extension get extended for even more days.
And so just to be clear at this point with respect to the current group, are there any Americans part of that group, yes or no?
No. If you're talking about today, no.
Okay, and why not?
Well, again, we don't develop the list. The lists are developed by Hamas, and of course on the Israeli side, they develop the list of Palestinian prisoners that they're going to release. That's between the parties. We're not involved in that process. I can obviously assure you that in every conversation we're having with our counterparts in the region, including Qatar, who has direct lines with Hamas, that we want to see Americans come out. And we're making that case as stridently as we can, but we are ultimately not in control of who gets on the list each day.
I understand that, but does that give you any additional pause or concern?
No, I don't think so. I mean, obviously, I would say clearly we want to get them home to their families. I don't want to dismiss that concern. We obviously want to see them. But in terms of because we haven't gotten any since Abigail over the weekend, we still believe that it's every possibility that we're going to be able to get the rest of the Americans out. It just may take a little bit longer than we want or that their families want. But we're not going to stop working at it.
I know you have said that the U.S. would like this pause extended further. What type of timetable are you seeking?
We're still in discussions, active, very ongoing discussions with all the parties here about potential extensions of the deal. Over the weekend, the president was able to get this extension over the finish line. We'll keep at it. I couldn't tell you right now as we're talking if there's going to be an extension and what that could look like in terms of length of days or number of hostages. We know that Hamas has more hostages that they either they're holding or that they can get access to. So the pool is much larger than what we've been able to get out so far, obviously. So we want to see this extended for as long as it possibly can take.
President Biden has said that conditioning aid to Israel is a worthwhile thought. I know earlier in the briefing you also said that the administration believes its approach is working. So is this something that's under serious consideration?
The president believes that the approach we're taking right now, thus far, has been working, has achieved results, not only in terms of supporting Israel's right and responsibility to go after Hamas, but also getting aid in, getting people out. That includes, obviously, hostages. So we're going to work with might and main on the approach that we've been taking, which, again, is results-based, and it has achieved outcomes.
I mean, how does the White House respond to someone like Senator Bernie Sanders, who has said that the blank check approach must stop?
I wouldn't say that this is a blank check. We're obviously going to continue to support Israel as they defend themselves. But look, every provision of military assistance to any nation around the world comes with an expectation that it's going to be used appropriately and in accordance with the law of war. And we have been discussing with our Israeli counterparts since the early hours of this conflict about the need to abide by that law of war and to respect innocent life, to reduce and to minimize civilian casualties. And that's not going to stop. That focus of us with our Israeli counterparts will continue.
I also want to get to this incident that occurred off the coast of Yemen. U.S. military officials say 2 ballistic missiles were fired from Houthi-controlled parts of the country towards a U.S. warship. How is the U.S. responding?
First of all, it's not entirely clear that it was 2 ballistic missiles, and it's obviously not clear to us anyway that the USS Mason was the target. The ballistic missiles or missile that landed in the ocean some 10 miles away, and it's probably just as likely that they were trying to target the Central Park, the merchant vessel that the USS Mason came to assist and to try to apprehend those pirates. So it's not exactly clear that it was an attack on the U.S. Navy or a warship. That said, what the Houthis have been doing in recent weeks is troublesome. It's a deep concern. Our message to them and to any other actor in the region through the additional force posture that we've added. In fact, the Mason is part of the Eisenhower strike group that the president ordered into the region. That message is don't escalate, don't widen, don't deepen this conflict. We have a serious national security interest in the region, and we have the tools and capabilities to defend them.
All right, Admiral John Kirby, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
The man accused of shooting 3 Palestinian students in Burlington, Vermont, has pleaded not guilty to attempted murder. Jason Eaton was arrested Sunday afternoon, less than 24 hours after the shooting occurred. Police say there is not yet enough evidence to support charging him with a hate crime. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders joins us now. Senator Sanders, thanks so much for being with us. You called this shooting shocking. What has the response been in your home state, and how is the community coping?
It is, people are outraged. They are horrified. I live 2 miles away from where the shooting took place. It's just hard to believe that 3 young men walking down the street on Thanksgiving weekend can get shot. It's incomprehensible. But I have to say that the fear is that this type of hatred that we're seeing is taking place all over America. We're seeing an increase not only in Islamophobia, but in anti-Semitism as well. And this is something we've got to get a handle on.
Yeah, I was going to say, even though police say there's not enough evidence yet to charge the suspect with a hate crime, we know the Justice Department is still looking into that possibility. But, what do you make of this reported rise that we've been seeing in both anti-Semitism and Islamophobia in this country since the war between Israel and Hamas started?
I think it's a horrible thing. God knows this country has gone through enough with bigotry and racial hatred and everything else. And I think what we have got to determine, people can have disagreements on political issues, but we've got to tone down this hatred. We've got to talk to each other. We've got to work things through. But I am very worried about the rise, both in Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, that we are seeing.
As we've been reporting, Israel and Hamas have agreed to extend this humanitarian pause for the next 2 days. What is your reaction to that news?
Well, I think it's great news. I think it means more hostages are going to be released, and equally important, it means that that in the midst of this terrible humanitarian disaster that we're seeing in Gaza, where over 1 million people have been displaced from their homes, not enough food, not enough water, not electricity, not fuel, that we're now seeing a substantial increase in those basic necessities coming into Gaza, which means that thousands of lives are going to be saved. So that is a very positive development.
You recently wrote an op-ed suggesting that there should be conditions to the U.S. relationship with Israel and that the blank check approach must end. The White House argues it is not a blank check, although we did hear the president over the weekend say that conditioning aid may be a worthwhile thought. How do you respond?
Well, this is how I respond. Look, Israel was attacked in an absolutely horrific way by Hamas. 1,300 innocent people were slaughtered. Israel has a right to defend itself. But what Israel does not have a right to do, in my view, is to kill 12,000 people in 6-7 weeks, 2/3 of whom are women and children. That they don't have a right to do. That's a violation of international law. The United States has always provided support for Israel. I think we have to continue to make sure that Israel can defend itself. But we also have a right to say to Israel, I'm sorry, you can't just do all kinds of bombing, which are killing innocent men, women, and children. And also, in talking to a very right-wing Netanyahu government, we have got to say, you know what, we need some thoughts and movement forward toward a two-state solution to deal with the crisis in the West Bank, where Palestinians are being thrown off of their land and are being killed. So we need, in my view, to say, if you want money from the United States, you know what, you got to hear what we want as well. We just can't get a blank check.
And then just very briefly, I know Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has made clear that he wants to try to tee up a vote as soon as next week on a foreign aid supplemental to help Israel, Gaza, Ukraine, and deal with other foreign priorities. Do you think that's possible?
Well, I don't know if it's possible, but I would just say I think there are a number of us who do have a concern about a very large blank check for Israel if there are not conditions attached to it.
And what about Republicans trying to condition aid to Ukraine on border security? Is that something you may be open to?
Well, I believe that it is terribly important that we stand up to Putin's aggression in Ukraine. If he is successful in defeating the people of Ukraine and taking over that country, I think there will be more efforts on his part to expand his imperialistic goals.
And
so I think we've got to stop him.
And sorry to interrupt you, Senator, but before we let you go, we have seen a wave of announcements in these last couple of weeks of members of both the House and Senate announcing either their retirements or that they're not seeking a re-election, so much so it's happening at a record rate. When will you make a decision about your re-election?
Well, as soon as I can. I think right now we are dealing with, as you well know, enormous issues. I want to focus on those issues, but I will be speaking to the people of the state of Vermont in a reasonably short period of time.
All right, Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Former President Trump and Nikki Haley are battling for support in South Carolina. We check on the state of the Republican field with our panel next. You're streaming America Decides.
Well, let me start with this.
this really happen?
Have you told the government?
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response?
You want me to just
What's
keep
wrong
going?
with that argument?
What have you learned?
Do you know why?
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 It's time for 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued from the landfill?
We've rescued 4.5 million pounds.
I can't even fathom how much food that is.
And that's one little person in one little city in America. We're going to call this chicken piccata. We did 450 of these meals today.
This is the exact dish that you and I are going to have.
Yep.
Oh, really good.
Is it good?
Mm-hmm.
Having a plan of how to keep people fed should be in every single city.
If we eliminated food waste, could we eliminate
hunger? Yes.
Eating Trash, now streaming on the free CBS News app. An original documentary from CBS Reports.
You had a substitute teacher that was pretty popular. What was his reputation?
Everyone loved him.
You had to miss a test. What did he offer to have you make up the test?
He said that I can come by after school was all over and just take the exam. The blinds were down. He closed the door. The next thing I knew, he was right next to me. That's when I realized what was going to happen. Even if I wanted to scream at the top of my lungs, no one would hear me because no one was there. He told me that if I ever said anything to anyone, he would kill me and he would kill my family. So I did it.
Pledge of Silence, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
He was there when the war in Ukraine started.
Extreme history. It's a big moment.
The extraordinary story behind Sean Penn's new Paramount Plus documentary, Superpower, when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable.
The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Why did you miss the moment?
I'm not sure why they missed the moment.
It doesn't look like Congress is doing anything. That's the role of Face the Nation, to focus on the issues at hand. That means a civil conversation with perspective.
Welcome back to America Decides. Days after former President Trump was on the field for the South Carolina-Clemson football game, Nikki Haley was in her home state making her pitch to voters. Bob Costa and Aaron Navarro join me now. Bob is a CBS News chief election and campaign correspondent, and Aaron is a CBS News political reporter. Robert, I want to start with you because it was kind of an interesting reception that the former president got when he got to that game, and he was booed, something he's probably not used to.
He was booed, and it's good to be with you, Nicole, after this Thanksgiving holiday. For former President Trump, going to South Carolina is in many ways like going on home turf politically. It's a place he's had a lot of success over the years. But just like his recent visits to Iowa, his recent visits to New Hampshire and South Carolina are all about consolidating his political base in those states. He's the front runner. He's ahead in the polls, but he knows former Ambassador Haley has a base in South Carolina. So that's why he's showing up to this football game. And he knows he's not universally beloved there, but he has the support of the governor, as you see there. And you see in former President Trump someone who knows that if Governor Ron DeSantis does well in Iowa, and someone like Ambassador Haley or Chris Christie, the former New Jersey governor, do well in New Hampshire, he needs to do well in South Carolina, so there he is.
And so speaking of Governor DeSantis, I know, Aaron, you've been kind of tracking his travels, and he's making this tour all around Iowa, trying to visit all 99 counties, which is a stripe of honor for many politicians. I mean, give us the latest on the state of his campaign.
Yeah, well, he's about to hit county number 99 this Saturday, and this whole full Grassley approach from him is really the crux of his argument and his campaign, and is kind of the center of whether he can pull off an upset win against Trump in Iowa. And it's good to note that Trump still leads heavily in Iowa, but DeSantis has been putting in that work the group backing him, Never Back Down, has set precinct captains to make sure that they have someone at every precinct on caucus night. And this Grassley tour is kind of just making sure he can connect with voters and make sure that they make those early connections so that when January 14, the week before the caucus rolls around, his campaign and his groups can make some calls to those voters.
We've got another debate coming up next month. What are you both watching for?
It's in that swing state of Alabama.
That ruby red swing state?
Right. Ruby red. I mean, deep ruby red. I've been to Alabama for many political stories over the years, and that's ruby red. Though the Democrats think eventually it can make some inroads there, as they have in places like Georgia in the Deep South. But this is a showdown that, for those on stage, is all about hoping it even gets a little attention. It's going to be on a cable network, and it's for so many of the contenders who are not named Donald Trump. It's an opportunity to signal to donors and supporters that they're in this race. They're gunning for the nomination. But at this point, if Trump doesn't show up, it's hard to get the attention and the foil they likely need to really get that jolt into Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina.
Yeah, and we've seen the former president do a lot of counter-programming. And when it comes to these debates, I also want to ask you both about some comments that the former president made over the weekend, where he said on social media that he is seriously looking at alternatives to the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare. We know Republicans have tried many times before to chip away at this. And for Democrats, it seems to be the gift that keeps on giving, so much so now we're seeing the Biden campaign jump all over this.
I actually interviewed then-President Trump back in early 2017, right as the repeal effort by Republicans fell apart. And I remember talking to him. He was on the phone with me on a Friday night, and he said, I can't believe this all fell apart, because getting this across the finish line in Congress is no easy feat. He struggled early on in his presidency to get this done. It ended up being a very pared-back form of health care legislation for Republicans. But so many conservative advocacy groups continue to have former President Obama's health care plan as a political target all these years later, and they're still looking to take it on in some capacity.
And this was a topic that in the 2022 midterms didn't really pop up when you looked at Republican campaigns. So it's interesting how Trump is bringing it up now.
And then lastly, we heard from Mitt Romney over the weekend. He spoke to our Norah O'Donnell and said that he would rather vote for a Democrat over Donald Trump or Vivek Ramaswamy. I mean, what do both of you make of a comment like that?
I really am looking with Senator Romney. He's not going to run for re-election. Does he end up supporting a no-labels ticket should one emerge? Does he even consider being on that ticket in some capacity if it's Senator Joe Manchin or someone else? How Romney plays 2024 is going to be something to watch. There was no expectation he would ever vote for former President Trump. But at this point, the question is, does he kind of sit on the sidelines, or does he try to spend his political capital?
It also tells me that DeSantis and Haley are duking it out, but there's still no clear answer for who is the alternative to Trump that can actually beat him, who has a path to do it. And that's why you see DeSantis and Haley kind of take swipes at each other, because that is the role that they need to have going into the primaries.
We're getting closer and closer to 2024. It'll be here before we know it.
Bob it's here,
Costa,
Nicole.
I know.
55 days. He's
yeah, exactly. Aaron Navarro, thanks so much for being with us. Mourners are paying their respects to former First Lady Rosalynn Carter. The director of the Carter Presidential Center and Library joins us next to discuss her legacy. You are streaming America Decides.
Our story's just begun.
Why did you want to share your story?
Water up this high?
Where are these coming from?
That's the $1 million question.
I'm a very curious person. I wake up every morning asking, what's happening in the world? Why is this happening? And how do we answer that question on the CBS Evening News?
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Haitians are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We aim every night to be factual and fair. That's our goal.
An original documentary from CBS reports controversial Congressman George Santos.
Why won't you answer our questions?
How did he manage to get elected?
Thank you very much, and God bless you, and God bless the USA.
George Santos' campaign was a campaign of deceit, lies, fabrication.
And who is he, really?
I knew him as Anthony DeVolder from Queens.
Really, who he is, he's a fraud.
I compare him to the Tinder swindler.
From people who know him, the truth, the facts, the lies.
He would say that he was worth $100 million.
It's an incredibly cynical episode in American politics, beyond satire.
Had you ever seen anything like this?
No, and I hope I never see it again.
Campaign of Deceit, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Since childhood, she never stopped reaching for the skies. Now she's spent more time in space than any other American.
I like being a part of something bigger than me.
Peggy Whitson's extraordinary career as a history-making astronaut when we go person to person.
Feel the forecast on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
I think I asked direct questions. I don't know that they're tough questions per se.
Why aren't you holding yourself to that standard?
It doesn't look like Congress is doing anything.
What has to happen?
That's the role of Face the Nation, to focus on the issues at hand. And that means a civil conversation with perspective.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels. 100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to America Decides. Former First Lady Rosalynn Carter is lying in repose in Atlanta tonight. She died in her home in Plains, Georgia, earlier this month at the age of 96. Earlier this year, I spoke with the CEO of the Carter Center about how she worked with her husband, former President Jimmy Carter. How engaged and involved has she been in the center's work? I mean, are they equal partners?
They're absolutely equal partners in everything they've done in life. And if they'd be walking through the halls, they'd be holding hands before they would come down to meetings. They were very much equal partners.
Dr. Meredith Evans is the director of the Carter Presidential Center and Library. She joins us now. Dr. Evans, thanks so much for being with us. I know the First Lady's body will be lying in repose tonight at the library and museum, so members of the public can pay their respects. But how else is the First Lady being remembered there?
Oh, so that's a great question. We are sharing photographs. We've a tribute on our website as well as on the website for the Carter Center. We're just showing her legacy right now in images. We are lucky. She blessed us with giving us her collection. So in a few years, we'll be opening a collection of her letters and her writings and correspondence. And so we're excited to really showcase her legacy from an archival perspective as well.
When the First Lady passed, former President Jimmy Carter called Rosalynn an equal partner. Obviously, they were married for some 77 years, but in what ways were they equal partners?
I think in all ways. I think they did everything together, but equally at the table. She had her initiatives. They had initiatives together that they did, and they were supportive of each other in all aspects. And so, you know, that fight for the Equal Rights Amendment is a joint effort. I think even time in the governor's mansion, she was the first woman to speak about the stigma of mental health before the state of Georgia, as well as in the White House. And so I think she stood on her own, and two equals become, a bigger whole.
What do you see as the most defining part of her legacy?
I think Mrs. Carter's defining part is her ability to work in the White House and beyond. I think the First Lady has an office because of Mrs. Carter. The East Wing became her office, and that's this First Lady's office to this day. She had staff, she was a good manager, and she's a good writer. So I think her legacy really speaks for itself. I think people know her only as, the former president's wife or the former first lady, but really she's Rosalind Carter, and she has her own mind and her own things that she wants to get done. And Equal Rights Amendment was one, the mental health is another, but caregiving, and even monarch butterflies and wanting pollinators to continue to keep our environment fresh and safe. So.
And you've really worked to showcase some of that at the library and center.
Yes. Right now we have 2 exhibits up for her, just talking about her diplomacy and the Equal Rights Amendment, and we're expecting to do more as things subside after, in the coming months. We'll add some more materials to it, to the collection.
All right, Dr. Meredith Evans, we thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and memories, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
And that does it for today. You can stream America Decides Monday to Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. You are streaming CBS News.
On Face the Nation, the way to learn is to listen.
We may have a recession.
Listening to how someone explains themselves is so key to understanding their perspective.